Welcome back to Maneuver. I'm Faith, and I'm here with Carbon and his Dudeness. Today we are going to rank each common in Spark of Rebellion for limited play. If you want to hear our thoughts on the leaders from this set in limited, find the link in the description. We are also launching the Maneuver Discord, which you can also find in the description. Note, these cards are not in order of the tier, they're just in a tier in themselves. Let's start off with the D tier. This contains cards which we would never pick unless we're passed to it in the very last pick of a draft.
Let's start off with Volunteer Soldier. It's just not good. Avoid it. Don't pick it.
Next up, we have Restock, which can be interesting as sometimes games can go to mill, but it's not relevant enough to really play it.
Sideboard card.
Now let's check out Confiscate. Not a card that you're going to want to run. There's not a lot of high value upgrades, and if they are, it's not worth running this card to stop them. There's better cards to deal with it.
It's another sideboard card. Jabba Scavenger, 2/1 Saboteur, just not good. Just avoid it.
Yeah. Then we have Mission Briefing event. Lets you draw 2 cards. Really, it's not really developing anything to board. You're going to fall behind pretty quickly if you play this card. So that's why it's in D tier.
These rankings are an aggregate of all of our scores. So this next one, Jeddah Agitator, I would have in C tier myself because it's a rebel trait. It's got Saboteur, and there's a chance for it to deal some damage. But we ended up with that in D tier.
One of the worst cards in the set. Katina Braggart actually might be the worst card in the set. It's really bad, dude. Your opponent just gets to trade it for free. Don't play this card.
We have Patrolling Viewing. The big miss here is the stat line 1/1 is just you want to be trading with stuff, and it's just not able to do that with the stat line.
Tactical Advantage, or better called Tactical Disadvantage. You're using an action to give a slight buff to a unit, but not worth it.
I'm actually stealing that name, Tactical Disadvantage. That's brilliant. Vanguard Infantry actually is a strictly better version of Bell Organa. Don't at me.
But still bad. Still in this tier. So we have Resilient, which is upgrade. Gives a little bit of health, but it's a little bit too niche and a little bit too. It's not having an immediate impact on the board, not letting you trade up generally very well. So that's why it's in D.
Next up, we've got Repair, and the best thing about this card is the art.
It's another sideboard card. Pretty much all of these can be sideboard cards if you need them to be in certain matchups, but just avoid them if you can. And the Surgical Droid, a 1/3 for 1, is not good, and potentially healing just never works out. So
next up, we're going to go to the C tier. This is going to be cards that we'll probably use to round out our deck if we need those last 27, 28, 29, or 30th card.
Yeah, exactly. If you need a 2-drop for Underworld Thug, he's serviceable. 2/3 boy, just put him out there. But if you already have enough 2-drops, no need.
Yeah, next we have TIE Fighter. TIE Fighter's kind of the same boat as that Viewing we talked about. The stat line is not great. However, the redeeming factor here is it's Imperial, so you can use it with Tarkin to get a 3/2 ship, which is a lot better. So in that specific circumstance, it's much of a better card.
Next up, we've got the Snow Speeder. You're basically paying 5 for a 3/6 body. Rebel trait's okay. That on attack trigger, though, is so conditional that the ambush is really what you're going for, and that's really not going to do a lot here.
Yeah, Regional Sympathizers. The 3/4 stat line for 4 is just not great. Restore 2 is fine sometimes, but like 3/4 just kind of dies too easily to other 4-drops. It's not exactly where you want to be.
Bounty Hunter Crew is okay. It's got ambush, and so it can have a little bit of impact on board, but that being 6 costs and just not having as much stats as some of the other ambush units makes it a little less good. It's a solid filler pick, but not really much beyond that.
Next up, we've got the Outer Rim Headhunter, which is on the outer rim of our deck. It's a raid 1, so it can deal some damage in space, but it's not going to do a lot. Its on attack triggers fine, but it might not last that long, so it's a filler.
This arm is pseudo removal, giving a unit -4 attack and then trading into it, and then keeping your unit alive isn't the worst, but you do have to take 2 actions to do it. So there's some opportunity for your opponent to just kill your unit you're going to trade with it in the first place or something.
Snapshot reflexes it's okay. It enables some trades that otherwise aren't possible, but it's just difficult to get value out of this card and difficult for it to go like 2 for 1, I guess, the card, because the unit after an attack is going to take damage, so it's just not the greatest.
Mining Guild TIE Fighter is an early ship with no effective traits, though, to really synergize with besides a vehicle trait. And it does have an on-attack effect to draw you cards, but you are then using your resources to not further your board just to get card advantage at a pretty high cost.
Occupier Siege Tank. The only saving grace of this card is it is an Imperial, which means it synergizes well with cards like Maximum Firepower and other cards like that. But a 5/4 body for 5 isn't exactly great. The grit can be handy sometimes, but only 4 health, right? Fewer health on a grit is not where you exactly where you want to be. You want to be higher health if you can.
Keep fighting is an okay event. Ready a unit. It's just a very specific effect, and it's a lot better when you can build around it a bit more in a constructed deck, and so it's not as impactful in a limited environment.
However, it is a tier card in the hyperspace variant. Very nice card.
Yeah,
And
sure.
speaking of cards which should be B tier, Partisan Insurgent is a 1/4 with an effective trait of Rebel. If you can build some red cards, it can deal a lot of damage. It's a pretty decent early card, but we have it in the C tier.
Precision Fire. I've never really even used this card that much. But part of me thinks it might even just be D tier, but it
And
feels like a sideboard card to me. It just feels like a sideboard card.
Saboteur can help close out games sometimes, which I think is why it's in the C tier as a potential.
Yeah, it's basically just a closer, and if you can trade off sometimes, that's fine, I guess. But
Ardent Sympathizer is solid. He's just a 3/3, and then his ability isn't always active in hitting the board. When his ability is active, he's a little bit better, but it's just too niche and too conditional, and that's why he's this down in C.
Next up, we've got Recruit. It's going to be a card that, if you don't have any other turn one play, which you might not in limited, it will be at least allow you to do something to grab a card that you want. With your deck being only 30 cards, looking through 5 after you draw your 6 is over 20% of your deck. So it's a pretty good chance you're going to find what you want.
just want to do some quick update on the math. 5 plus 6 is 11 out of 30, which is over 33% of your deck, but it's fine. Alliance Dispatcher is it's filler. It's not that great, but it does have very nice synergy with the escort skiff. If you can go first, dispatcher, and then turn 2 use it to play an escort skiff to ambush their turn 2 play, that is a very great line you can do.
We got Rugged Survivors up next. Talon's not amazing. It's got a conditional ability to draw cards only if you have a leader out, and you got to wait a full turn to do that. The grit is kind of nice. I like this sometimes as like a filler pick in Krennic and those types of decks. But other than that, otherwise it doesn't see that much play.
Guardian of the Wills is the cheapest unit, which enables the Force trait. She also has the ability to make your one of your upgrades that you put on her cost 1 less. So she can allow you to maybe do some things with upgrades, but overall, it's a pretty weak unit that's going to die to most things and not trade effectively.
Moment of Peace, otherwise known as Moment of Based, one of the best arts in the set. This is a very strong part of the card. Other than that, giving a shield for 1 can be pretty good sometimes. Like, I think there might be a case that this could be B tier, but it is a little situational. The best thing about this card is that it can go on your leader, and that can be good.
Let him cook. Up next, we're on our B tier. These are going to be some solid picks, which, while not immediate, they are still going to be impactful in your deck.
Yeah, these are picks you're picking somewhere in halfway through the pack where you're trying to figure out what colors you're in. You're taking some of these. You're usually pretty happy. Starting with the Carillion Freighter. He costs 5, which I'm not a huge fan of, but he is a 4/4 Sentinel in space, which there are not a lot of space Sentinels. So it can be fairly impactful. But again, it costs 5, so, pros and cons.
Next up, we have Frontier ATRT. Very solid 3/5 with potentially has ambush, even another vehicle unit. It's usually not too hard to turn on this ability since pretty much every single, I mean, as far as we know, every single space unit is a vehicle unit. So as long as you have a space unit, this is coming down 3/5 ambush, killing something, and most likely lives for another attack. So very solid card.
Up next, we got Rebel Pathfinder, who's a decent 2-drop. Having Saboteur, one of the cheapest ways to get Saboteur, it can sometimes effectively trades with some cards like Crafty Smuggler. So it's got some use there. It can also get by Sentinel, which can be an effective way to get some damage in.
Same thing with the Alliance X-Wing. It's a 2/3 body that has Rebel trait, which is a very important trait. It does go in space, which means it will dodge more stuff than the Pathfinder can. So I think if I'm in a pack between Pathfinder and Alliance X-Wing, I'm picking X-Wing over Pathfinder just about every time.
Maximum Firepower is a removal that has a really high ceiling and potentially can just delete leaders as they deploy. The reason we have it in B is because it's very specific, requiring you to have usually 2 units on the board, both Imperial and they both need to be, alive. So it's a bit more specific, and that's why we have it in B, but a solid removal.
Next up, we've got a cell block guard. For 3 resources, get a 3/3 with Sentinel, who's an Imperial. He's going to be something that you're going to play to keep yourself alive a little bit, and he does a pretty effective job. He'll be able to effectively stop most 2 drops from attacking.
Snowtrooper Lieutenant is a pretty good card. I think there could be a case for it to be an A tier because it allows you to trade up on units. It allows you to potentially trade big health, small attack units, and then keep them still around after they do the trade on the enemy's unit. It can provide some pretty solid value. So it's pretty good. Solid.
Next up, we have Gamorrean Guards. Gamorrean Guards is, a 4/4, and it has conditional Sentinel if you have got another cunning unit. This card's pretty solid. If it's got Sentinel, it is pretty annoying to trade into this, especially if your opponent has only played stuff that attacks for 3 so far in the game. It can be difficult to remove, and so it's just solid Sentinel, solid card.
It's a really good play after the previous turn you play Swoop Racer, who goes Burr. You looking at this, it's a vanilla 4/3, which doesn't sound impressive for 3, but it is really effective. The only thing it's really kind of that keeps it from going higher actually is Battlefield Marine, which costs 2, which effectively trades with it. But it can trade up pretty well, and it can definitely present a threat on the board.
Yeah, not just Battlefield Marine, but any 3X can trade into it, which there are a decent amount of 2-cost 3Xs. But next card, Asteroid Sanctuary, lets you tap down, it lets you exhaust a boy, which is very good. And then the shield, if you can give it to one of your 3 drops or lower, can be a huge swing in tempo and like board advantage on the table. But it is a little situational, so that's why it's in B tier.
Rogue Operative is a solid 2/4 with Saboteur and Raid 2. It It's nice having 4 health on a 3 cost is really nice because it means that it's going to live most of the early plays and potentially get to go 2 for 1. So I like this for trading a lot. However, just defending with 2 attack is not ideal because it's not going to really, defend great against these other 3 costs. So that's why it's in B tier.
Next up, we've got Lothal Insurgent. A 3/2 Rebel is a pretty good stat line for a 2-cost unit. It's when played is definitely neutral at kind of as a floor, because the opponent might draw a card that's better than they discard because that's at random. But overall, you're going to be taking this if you want to get some early board presence.
Next up, we got the ISB agent. This is one of the very few ways you can actually ping damage in this game, and it's very hard to come back from value trades that your opponent does to you. And this is one of the cards that can help you get back in the game after your opponent value trade. So pretty solid.
Next up, we have Wampa, who's just a 4 cost 4/5 with Overwhelm. I mean, not much to say about this guy. He's got just great stats for the cost. He's got Overwhelm. He's just solid. You slam him on 4, and you see if your opponent has a way to deal with him. So
Next up, we've got Disabling Fang Fighter. A 3 for a 3/2 flying is okay. It's got a when played effect, which can be very strong if you can target an upgrade. One of the problems is this is in limited. Your opponents may not always be running upgrades, and so it's questionable what they can target. It should be noted that it can target both shield tokens and experience tokens. They are upgrades, so it does have some value there.
I was about to note that if you didn't, that the Fang Fighter can target shields or experience, which can be really handy occasionally. The Infiltrator skill, I kind of like this card more than others. I am pretty happy having at least 1 copy of this card in every red deck in any draft ever, because being able to equip it on your leader and getting around Sentinel is just huge. And then very occasionally you can dumpster your opponent's shielded unit. So it's not bad.
and then we're looking at Spec Force Soldier. It's a 1 cost with 2/2 stat line is not the greatest ever, but the one played when a unit loses Sentinel can be pretty impactful because Sentinel is such a really strong keyword in limited. I've found so I think the card is solid. It's a rebel. It's a trooper. It's got some good traits. So yeah, it's a solid pick.
First Legion Snowtrooper is another one of those turn 1 plays that you can make costing 2. Being a 2/3 is an average at best stat line, but an Imperial and Trooper are relevant tags. And its real benefit is when you attack something that's damaged, it's going to get +2/+0 and Overwhelm, which is going to hopefully get some damage on the base.
Next up, Death Star Stormtrooper, 3/1 for 1. Solid stat line all around. There are very little ways to get pinged in this game, so that 1 health isn't too much of a liability most of the time. and he trades up very favorably more often than not. And if you're playing Tarkin, a 4-2 on turn 1 is kind of the biggest boy you can play.
All right, Homestead Militia, it's a 3/4 for 3. It's got good stats. The ability doesn't come into play until you've got 6 or more resources when it gains Sentinel, which is Sentinel is quite strong, but it's just not enough to push it into A tier. It just is in B tier. Solid pick.
Cargo Juggernaut is going to come in next. Being a shielded unit coming in at 4/6, it comes down with a pretty good body. Coming in at 6s, you're going to want it to do something when it enters play. Luckily, it does do that. If you control a blue unit, you can heal 4 damage from your base, which can be an effective way to heal yourself and keep you in the game a little longer.
Make an opening is a pretty solid removal. It kills obviously 2 health units. The big ones are stuff like 7 Fleet Defender, gets right through that. It can kill a Crafty Smuggler. The heal 2 can be relevant sometimes, but you're really just playing it as removal. It's fine.
Cloud City Wingguard is just a 2/4 Sentinel for 3. It's solid, okay body. Like we said, 2 defending with 2 attack is not, or 2 power is not the greatest ever. There are some leaders that can get more value out of this card. Like Krennic is able to get usually get this damage, and this can attack for 3. It's a lot better then, but it's a little niche, but it can be solid in the right deck.
The next unit here is Wilderness Fighter, which is 2/4 body, same as a trooper trait. It's got shielded though, so it is able to survive that first attack, hopefully get some damage in. So if you use it effectively, it can work around certain decks.
That Wilderness Fighter was a point of contention for me personally. I think it's C tier, but these boys wanted to argue B tier, so here we are. But the next card is Vigilant Honor Guards, 4/6 Sentinel. It does have Rebel. Obviously, if it gets a damage, it loses the Sentinel, which isn't as good, but 6 health is a big butt that it's very hard to get through with just 1 attack. So he usually survives and can do more stuff beyond just providing the one-time Sentinel. So he's good enough.
So speaking of big bodies, we have Consular Security Force, just a 4-cost 3/7 vanilla Rebel Trooper unit. Yeah, the biggest upside of this card obviously is that 7 health stat line, meaning that this card is most likely and limited going to stick around for a while, be able to make hopefully multiple trades and potentially go 2 for 1 or 3 for 1. But because it doesn't really have an immediate impact on the board, it doesn't do anything beyond this trading. This is why we have it in B.
We're now going to move to the A tier, and these are going to be strong picks. You're going to take them probably in that 3 to 6 range of your picks, 3rd to 6 pack card.
Start off with Metal Ceremony is 0 cost to give each rebel you attack with up to 3 experience. 3 different rebels up to experience each. It's pretty good, maybe less good when you start running multiple copies of it. But if you can get off 2 experience with this thing, it's gonna feel really great. And if you can get off 3 experience with this thing, your opponent is just gonna be in shock. So maybe it's a bit of a snowball win more card, but I think it's pretty solid.
And then we're looking at ATST, which is just a huge villain unit. It's a 6-cost 6/7 with Overwhelm, Imperial. I mean, not much to say. It's a really great closer to games. 7 health is a lot. 6 is a lot for a lot of decks to deal with on that turn. And it's got Overwhelm, so it starts just trading with your units and dealing damage to the base. So this is a great solid card to close out games with.
Hyper Prodroid is next, a 2-cost 3/2 Imperial that when you play it, you get to look at your opponent's hand. This is going to let you get some information of what your opponent's doing. Some people might argue it's S tier. The 3/2 body is quite strong, pretty good for the stats, but it does a good job in your deck. That's good A tier.
Next up, we have Waylay, a very solid removal in yellow, letting you bounce any non-unit or non-leader unit back to their opponent's hand. And the key thing with this is that if they go all in with a bunch of upgrades on 1 unit, you can just make them go all the way and bounce it back. And that and bouncing big cost units is definitely the best use for Waylay.
And then we're looking at Surprise Strike, which lets you attack with the unit and it gets +3 power for this attack. This card is really good. It's great for closing out games if you just need that last bit of damage. It's also great for, Dudes was talking about this earlier, is trading with leaders. I mean, kind of out of nowhere, use a unit to trade off your opponent's leader. That's a really strong play, especially unlimited when they don't have a great way to answer that, potentially protect their leaders as well. So yeah, overall solid card, very strong pick.
This next card is one of the ones that keeps Viper Probodroid from moving up, in my opinion, is Crafty Smuggler, a 2-cost 2/2 shielded. It's a really effective turn 1 play, and it can trade with most other 2 costs, and it can even trade with 3 costs as well, effectively.
Next up is the Liberator gunship, 3/4 ambush in space. This particular ship isn't a rebel, which is part of why probably it's not in S tier, but because ambush though is a very, very, very times infinity, very good trait in limited, and as many ambushes as you can get is a good thing. And 3/4 on 4 kills most of the ships people can play on turn 1 and 2. So it's pretty alright.
Then we have 7th Fleet Defender, just 3 cost 3/2 with shield. This card is one of the most annoying space units to remove in the game. That shield just makes it very difficult, and you'll often find this card going 2 for 1 or pushing extra damage to the base. So very strong pick for cunning ability.
Escort Skiff, we mentioned it earlier. And speaking about ambush cards being good, if you have a green unit, 4/4 ambush for 4 can really surprise your opponent and effectively trade for you. With not too much of a barrier to entry, it can go on either side as well, which is nice.
Just on the escort skiff, just for a moment, there are some times on turn 3 you are better off playing a unit first before you attack, and then claiming and first turn on turn 3 playing this escort skiff to trade in the value trade right off the bat. That's a very solid line and it can swing games in a huge way. But the next card up, Strike True, this card is one of my personal favorites. It allows you to deal damage to a unit based on one of your unit's powers. And its main benefit is that it can go across arenas. You can use your ground unit to attack a space unit or vice versa. In my draft last night, I had a 6 attack Gladiator Star Destroyer that I used Strike True on to take out my opponent's 6/6 Han Solo in the ground lane. And it was a huge swing in the tempo of that game.
And then we're looking at resupply. So ramp can situationally be very strong, and when you get a leader and a deck that supports ramp, I feel like it's one of the strongest possible things you can do in limited sometimes, especially because it gets your leader out that that much sooner. And so in the right deck, this is an absolutely banger pick, very strong card.
Next, we have Steadfast Battalion. Steadfast costs 5, and it's really a card. Having a 5/5 overwhelm is generally a solid body, maybe a little understated for 5 straight up. But if you do have your leader, when you attack, you are able to buff either himself or another one of your units. With the way that where leaders come out, it can be good timing that you can use it for an effective pick.
Yeah, the battalion goes up a bunch too if you have ECO. But okay, so the Consortium Star Viper, 3/3 with not really relevant traits in space that if you have initiative, you get restored 2. I love this card with cards like Escort Skiff and Frontier ATRT because it enables both of those cards to give ambush on the next turn, and you can go into space while still allowing you to play your ambush cards on the ground and contest in both lanes. It's a really solid card that I'm happy to play in any green deck.
We have Academy Training, just 2 cost, +2/+2 upgrade. This is okay. It can create really snowbally units that your opponent, since there's a lack of removal in this format, right? It can create these situations where your opponent just can't answer the card and you're able just to beat them down. And the other situation obviously is putting this on your leader makes it so difficult for them to remove your leader, and you can just essentially win the game with your leader alone there. So very strong card.
Gladiator Star Destroyer is a 6 cost, 5/6 Imperial space unit, which when you play, you get to give Sentinel to a unit. It can target itself, so you are getting a potential of getting a space Sentinel. If you've got a regular ground unit like any of your leaders, you can give that Sentinel as well. Sentinel in limited is very important because it can sometimes just protect you from losing the game from your opponent or even protecting one of your other units. So it has a lot of value in that regards.
And he didn't mention that you can target your opponent's units. And so if they're hiding a unit behind the Sentinel, you can give that unit Sentinel and then attack into it. A very sneaky but strong play. Next up, we have Seasoned Shore Trooper. I think there's a case for this in B tier because I don't personally like 2/3s for 2 because they die to 3/3s and you were just straight hosed. But that being said, it's a solid card. It is Imperial, which is a huge trait to have. And when it is a 4/3 when you have 6 or more resources later, it definitely feels good.
All right, then we're looking at Vanquish, which is a blue event, just defeat a non-leader unit. I mean, removal is good in this game, and this potentially just deletes one of your opponent's, few win conditions that they might have. So very, very solid removal card, great in the common slot, a very strong pick for sure.
Distant Patrolcraft is one of those few Sentinel space boys. So for 4, you get a 3/4 Sentinel, and that's going to just help keep your space lane down, protected. And also the 3 attack is going to make your opponent think twice about running their ships, especially their early ships, into it without being defeated.
Next up, we've got the Restored Arc 170, 2/3 Space Boy that has Restore 1. He is a rebel, which is the best thing about the card, but and he's really the only 2-drop in blue hero as well. So if you want a 2-drop and you're in blue hero, it's your only choice.
Then we're looking at Academy Defense Walker. This card is great because it does a bunch of things immediately when you play it. As a Sentinel, it's protecting your board. It's also a 5/5, which is so it puts a lot of stats on the board, and it's buffing up any damage things you have on the board. And especially if you can land that buff on your leader, you're going to be in a really good spot. So this card is just kind of like a bit of a Swiss Army knife. Really good, especially with Krennic. Just all around very strong card to pick.
This is where the S tier should start. We've got Scout Bike Pursuer, probably my favorite common in this set. 1/4 for 2 with Grit. Very powerful card. Pairs great with Krennic because with any amount of damage, it at worst becomes a 3/3. Potential of being a 5/1. It's got insane value if you can use it correctly. Take this card and figure out how to use it because you will win games with that. And now we're going to go to the S tier. These are cards which you're going to first pick in your pack. It can be tempting to take that rare, but as we've all experienced in draft, commons can be more powerful in your limited gameplay.
Start off with our boy, the Fleet Lieutenant. 3/3 lets you attack with another unit. If it's a rebel, it gets +2. This card is amazing for all the same reasons the Fleet Lieutenant, or I'm sorry, the Snowtrooper Lieutenant was good earlier, but a 3/3 for 3 is just better than a 2/2 for 2. And this has the benefit of you have turn 1 play, whatever, and then your turn 2 play is this. You attack, you trade up, whatever you do, you're maintaining tempo, you're going to grab the initiative. It's a great in aggro deck, absolutely first pickable, and as many of those as you can get, you're going to be in good shape.
Next up, we have Syndicate Lackeys, which is just a 5-cost 5/4 ambush. Pretty straightforward card, but this card is pretty absurd when it comes to trades. That 5 attack and ambush combined lets you kind of delete some really annoying units, and it also with that 4 health some often stays alive, so it could very easily go 2 for 1 and force your opponent to lose 2 units. Or if they leave it on the board, you're going to be eating 5 damage into your base on the following turn. So yeah, overall, very very solid, great card to be picking.
This next card, Open Fire, it costs 3, deals 4 damage to your unit. It is a card itself which defines a threshold of life that you're always calculating in a game. That ability to say, okay, if my unit's at 4 or less life, it can be open fired is something you're going to be needing to account for. And if you have it in your deck, you're going to make your opponents need to account for it from yours.
I should note that the 3 previous cards were all single aspect, so they all had the benefit of keeping you open to either different colors in the same alignment or either hero and villainy, in red or yellow or whatever. So staying flexible with your first pick is very good. That being said, the Green Squadron A-Wing is just the best 2-drop in space that you can play. Trades with every other 2-drop in space that they can play on turn 1. It's just fantastic. You love everything it's got. It's a rebel. I love this card. One of my favorite cards in the entire game, period. I wish there were more like it. I would take 10 different A-Wings if I could. But yeah, take it, be happy, go aggro, swing face.
In limited, you can run 10 of a card if you pick it. There's no deck limit.
There is no deck limit.
So next up, we have Imperial Interceptor, which this card is just absolutely phenomenal. Removal is very strong and limited, and this card is space removal on a stick, and a very nice 3/2 Imperial stick at that. So this card deletes these early space units that get played against you, most of which you're gonna have 3 health, and it's just almost a better version of Oztech Liberator gunship because it doesn't necessarily like die to the unit, right? So just a very overall very strong card. If you're in red black and you see this card, this is a absolutely phenomenal pick for your deck.
Mercenary Company's next, a 6-cost 5/5. It's similar to Syndicate Lackey, as mentioned also in the S tier. It has Ambush with 5 power. but it also has Overwhelm, and it also has that one extra health, which is going to keep it alive a little longer. The Overwhelm, if you do punish someone's card and you're not wasting the damage because it is going to attack their base, it also has one more trait of the Trooper trait. Being in green as well, it could be ramped up to, so there's no reason it wouldn't be S tier.
Yeah, cannot say how much I love Mercenary Company. I think that card is fantastic, and I'll take multiple copies in every green deck I ever play. Echo Base Defender, 3 cost 4/3 Sentinel. I mean, there's not much to say about that. It's just a great way that attacks can potentially trade up. Now, eventually, it can potentially be traded down with a 2-drop, but being able to protect your other units, attacking for 4, it's a common. It's fantastic all the way around.
And
It
it's worth
is
mentioning it's a rebel as well. Yeah.
it is also a
So
rebel, of course, obviously.
synergies is great with a lot of the other solid rebel cards. Speaking of solid rebel cards, we have Battlefield Marine, which is a vanilla green hero, 2 cost, 3/3 rebel trooper. I think this card is pretty much just the best 2 cost card in the game. The stat line being 3/3, immediately it trades almost everything and survives all these 2/3s that exist. It's a common, it's a rebel for all the synergy. It's got trooper as well. Just an insanely strong early card that can just from turn 1 put you in a super advantageous state.
We have 10 commons in this list, so it is possible to get all of these in one pack. And if you do have all 10 of these commons, you are taking Super Laser Technician first. It does something that no other card is going to do for you, which is going to ramp you and ramp you effectively, whipping a unit on the board. It's just too good to pass up on. Take this first, win your game.
And then last but not least, we have the Death Trooper. 3/3 that lets you deal 2 damage to an enemy unit and 2 damage to one of your units in the ground arena. This is another one of those cards that allows you to ping off a favorable trade that your opponent has done, letting you get back some of the tempo you've lost from the trade earlier. It's a great comeback card. I would absolutely run as many of these as I can get in my deck. And if you saw Carbon on the late night draft stream from it was about a month ago now, 3 weeks, whatever it was, he ended up winning the whole thing with you had like 4 of these Death Troopers in your deck or whatever it was. It was absurd. They were absolutely the MVP of the match, and I love this card so much.
Let us know in the comments below which cards you disagreed with and which cards you'd rank higher or lower. Also, stay tuned to our next video where we review the uncommons in the set. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on Outmaneuver.